For the terrain inside of this environment, what we want to do is take a look at making it work within this shape. Usually when you first start a terrain, it's just toss one in and start having fun making hills and things, and we want to do that, but we also want to give a little bit more purpose to it. In the hierarchy, we'll just go to Create, and when you click on Create, you go to 3D Objects, and inside of there is a Terrain option. Just go ahead and click on Terrain. Now when you create terrain, take a look real quick. You see how big terrain is? So terrain default comes in at 2000 in size. It's huge. What we don't want to do is actually use that much of the element. So what we're going to do is if you click on your terrain, over in the terrain in the settings in the inspector, you see the little setting gizmo over on the right hand side. If you click on it, let's go ahead and start off by just going to there, and then inside terrain width and length. Let's see, 2000, 2000. Let's type in 100 by 100. There we go. So notice the terrain itself becomes a little bit more usable at this point. We could go maybe a little bit bigger. We'll try 200 by 200 and double the size here. There we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and move it over. So we'll have a little bit of a backdrop, and then we'll also have a little bit of a foreground area. So I'm going to take and move it so it's just about in the center right there. And then we'll move it down so we see our player right there. Let's refocus. There we go. Okay, so we're going to move our terrain up. I'm just grabbing the dial on the side right here, up until it gets to about the same height as this one. Alright. When you're selecting your terrain, you may notice that if you're in the mode, you won't be able to click on this, and sometimes you just have to click on an object to get out of it. What we want to do though is with the terrain in here, we want to go to the terrain. We're just going to go through the tools, kind of get an understanding of how to use it and what we can do with it. Again though, let's go back to our settings. The first thing you want to do, and this is the most important part, is actually set up your settings. The first area here, you have a pixel error. This is going to be how far out before it starts to change. If you want really good pixel quality, you can change it to 1. The issue with it though is it is larger overhead when it does this. For the other major parts, we have trees and details, and those are all good for the default. We're not really going to worry about that just yet, but what we want to do is set up our resolution. If you go down to where you see terrain height is how high you can go with it. So this is 200, which means 600 would be the height that it would take it. The height map resolution, at the moment it's set for 513. When you do a height map resolution, you have to do +1. So 512 plus 1 being 513. We'll go ahead and do 2049. I think it'll do that one. Yeah. And then detail resolution, this is actually how high that you want the detailed objects that you paint on, and we'll leave it at 1024 for that. And then the detail resolution per object, actually I think this only goes up to like 32, we'll leave it at 8. And then the control, I'm going to do both of these at 2048, this one and the base texture resolution. There we go. If you set these, and you can even set these up to 4096, if you set those up high, you're going to have more detail in your mesh geometry to actually create and sculpt with. Alright, so if we have those set up, the other thing that we need to actually have inside of our settings is a material. When it comes to the terrain texture for Unity, they have a few, they have a couple, but there's also some good ones online that create better material surfaces. We'll go ahead and create one in our materials. If you go over to your material in the project and just right click and do create and do material, let's call this one terrain. And the terrain material for the shader type over here on the inspector, if you click on the drop down, this one's going to be under nature terrain. So notice we went from shader down to nature, and then terrain, and then we're going to use the bumped specular. Alright, so just like we used with the other, but it's one specific to the terrain. So be sure that it's nature terrain that you're going to. Alright, let's go ahead and go back to our terrain, and we're going to either drag or click on either one, and you'll go to material terrain right there. So now the terrain is going to be applied. That's going to be what all of the material type show up as when we start applying it. Alright, now we have all of those settings, everything set in place, everything's ready for us to start sculpting and start working with it. Be sure that you save it, and then the next thing we'll do is start working through loading textures and taking the geometry of it up and down.